네, 지금부터 국제 바칼로레아 글로벌 리더 특강이 시작될 예정이니 참석자께서는 모두 착석해 주시기 바랍니다. 행사에 앞서 오늘 특강에 대해서 간단히 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 오늘 특강은 내빈 소개, 교육감님 인사 말씀, 그리고 축사, 강사 소개 이어서 특강과 질의응답으로 진행됩니다. 강사님께 궁금한 점 있으면 옆면에 보시는 QR코드로 접속하셔서 글을 남겨주시면 추후 취합해서 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 아울러 주차는 무료로 지원되오니 아까 QR코드 등록하셨으니까 그게 진행되면 되겠습니다. 마찬가지로 지금 갖고 계시는 수신기는 토론 시간이 끝나면 반드시 반납을 부탁드리겠습니다. 그럼 지금부터 국제 바칼로레아 글로벌 리더 특강을 시작하겠습니다. 안녕하십니까. 오늘 특강 진행을 맡은 대구광역시교육청 미래교육과장 학사 허정호입니다. 먼저 경화홀 비상시 대피 및 행동 요령을 잠시 사진으로 보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 다음은 국기에 대한 경례를 하도록 하겠습니다. 모두 자리에서 일어나 정면에 있는 국기를 향해 주십시오. 국기에 대하여 경례.
나는 자랑스러운 태극기 앞에 자유롭고 정의로운 대한민국의 무궁한 영광을 위하여 충성을 다할 것을 굳게 다짐합니다.
바로 모두 자리에 앉아 주시기 바랍니다. 다음은 내부 참석자 소개가 있겠습니다. 대구광역시교육청 강은희 교육감님 참석하셨습니다. 대구광역시교육청 백채경 교육국장님 참석하셨습니다. 미래교육과 이혜정 과장님 참석하셨습니다. 미래교육과 이경숙 장학관님 참석하셨습니다. 다음은 경북대학교 사범대학 최원식 학장님 참석하셨습니다. 경북대학교 IB글로벌센터 이정열 센터장님 참석하셨습니다. IB 한국정부 파트너십 이기동 자문위원님 참석하셨습니다. 이어서 대구광역시교육청 강은희 교육감님께서 인사 말씀을 하시겠습니다. 교육감님을 큰 박수로 맞이해 주십시오.
네. 여러분 반갑습니다. 현장에 계신 여러 교육가족 여러분, 그리고 유튜브로 중계를 보고 계시는 교육가족 여러분 모두 반갑습니다. 이제 12월이 훅 지나가고 있습니다. 이맘때가 되면 굉장히 바쁘시죠? 바쁘기도 하고 아쉽기도 하고 그렇습니다. 오늘은 알고 계시는 것처럼 우리가 IB 전반적인 모든 부분을 이제 어제, 오늘, 내일 이렇게 IB 관련한 여러 가지 세션들이 준비가 되어 있습니다. 전 세계적으로 IB 월드스쿨이 몇 개쯤 되는지 조금 아시죠? 예, 몇 개 정도 될까요? 예, 현재 카운터로 보면 그 사이도 계속 바뀌고는 있어요. 162개국에서 6,044개교 정도 있다고 합니다. 그런데 뭐 오늘도 인정받는 학교가 있을 테니까 계속 늘어나고 있겠죠. 우리 대구에는 11월 4일 중앙고등학교가 IB월드스쿨로 이제 인정이 되었습니다. 그래서 33개의 IB월드스쿨이 있고 26개의 후보 학교 그리고 21개의 관심 학교가 있습니다. 그리고 기초 학교는 선생님들이 그냥 연구하는 학교인데요. 34개의 교가 있어서 전체 114교가 IB 플랫폼 형태의 교육을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이제 IB를 하는 것 자체가 중요한 게 아니고 우리가 IB를 통해서 우리 교육을 무엇을 변화시키고 어느 방향으로 나가야 되는지 그 방향성을 함께 하는 게 저는 더 중요하다고 생각합니다. 그래서 오늘은 내일 이제 본격적인 개막에 앞서서 사전 이제 개막 전이겠죠. 그래서 어렵게 모신 분이 있습니다. 오늘 미국, 스위스, 프랑스, 인도, 네덜란드 굉장히 여러 곳을 다니셨어요. 그리고 본인도 IB 월드스쿨에서 공부를 하셨고 그리고 IB 월드스쿨에 교사를 거쳐서 교장을 하고 계십니다. 그러니까 IB라는 환경 속에만 계셔서 일반 학교, 우리가 얘기하는 일반 학교의 개념이 아까 말씀을 나눠보니 전혀 없으세요. 네, 그래서 이제 한국의 여러 교육 시스템도 짧게 설명은 드렸습니다. 충분한 이해는 못하신 것 같아요. 그렇지만 IB 학교에 대한 많은 시스템에 대한 이해는 매우 풍부하십니다. 그래서 IB 월드스쿨을 이끌고 오시는 콘라드 휴즈 박사님을 모셨습니다. 휴즈 박사님은요, 이력 제가 이미 뭐 광고가 나갔기 때문에 아실 겁니다. 유네스코 국제교육국의 선임연구원을 하셨고 더럼대학교입니다. 더럼대학교 겸임교수를 하고 계시고 스위스 제네바 국제학교 총괄 책임을 맡으셨다가 방금 여러 학교, 아까 프랑스 학교에서도 계셨던 것 같습니다. 문학 석사, 철학 박사, 교육학 학사를 하셨습니다. 그래서 오늘 내용들을 아마 들어보시면 굉장히 여러분께서 정말 교육 전반적인 특히 IB 학교의 흐름, IB 학교에서 어떻게 교육이 진행되는지 이런 제반적인 내용을 아마 충분히 탐색하실 수 있는 시간이 될 것 같습니다. 오늘은 우리 대구가 IB 교육을 시작한 지 올해가 1.0 시대를 지나 2.0 시대로 가고 있습니다. 그래서 평가 시스템도 상당히 변화되고 있고 그런 여러 부분도 함께 모색할 수 있는 시간이 될 것 같습니다. 경북대 사범대학에서도 IB를 운영을 하고 계시죠. 우리 최원식 학장님, 아주 열정적으로 하고 계셔서 감사드리고요. 이정열 센터장님도 그 대학원뿐만 아니라 학부 학생들에게도 이렇게 교육을 좀 널리 확대해 주셔서 고맙습니다. 멀리서 온 우리 이기동 교장 선생님, 이기동 박사님께도 감사드리고요. 오늘 여러분 좋은 시간 되십시오. 고맙습니다.
다음은 경북대학교 IB글로벌교육센터 이정열 센터장님 축사가 있겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 경북대학교 IB글로벌센터 센터장 이정열입니다. 일단 반갑습니다. 네. 저도 이제 중학교, 고등학교 교사를 거쳐서 경북대학교에서 이렇게 이제 대학생들을 가르치고 있는데요. 이 IB라는 것들에 대해서 우리가 관심을 가지게 되는 가장 중요한 목적은 뭐 ATL이나 ATT나 같은 교수 학습 접근법도 있겠지만 교육의 본질이 무엇인가? 우리가 교육이 오랫동안 진행되어 왔는데 교육을 교육답게 어떻게 할까? 이런 고민을 가진 분들이 함께 모일 수 있는 그러한 공동체를 이제 좀 제공한다는 점이 가장 큰 의미인 것 같습니다. IB 학교에 보면 교사분들이 서로 모여서 유니플랜도 작성하시고 어떤 자료를 할 것인가 이런 논의를 하는 과정이 학생들의 성장도 좋지만 교사분들의 어떤 역량을 증진하는 데도 많은 도움이 되는 것 같습니다. 저는 이제 이 IB라는 시스템이 공교육에 도입되면서 학교 현장에 많은 변화를 가져오고 있는데요. 그거와 더불어 이제 선생님들이 해야 할 일도 더 많아지고 업무도 많아지고 공동체 모임도 더 많아지면서 이런 교육에 대한 시스템이나 규정이 좀 바뀌어서 선생님들이 교육에 좀 더 전념할 수 있는 그런 분위기가 되면 IB가 추구하는 학습 자산이라든가 교육의 본질을 좀 더 구현하는 데 많은 도움이 되지 않을까 생각합니다. 그래서 선생님들이 이제 여러 지역에서 오셔서 여기 모이셨으니 그러한 얘기도 하시고 우리가 교육을 어떻게 하면은 더 진짜 교육답게 할 수 있을까 그런 고민을 함께 나눠서 학교 현장에 가셔서 또 많은 논의가 지속될 수 있기를 기대하겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 그러면 특강 바로 전에 여러분 갖고 계시는 수신기 사용법 잠시 안내드리고 특강 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 수신기에 보면 가운데에 전원 버튼을 꾹 눌러주십시오. 그러면 전원이 들어오죠. 그런 다음에 이 선이 나의 몸 앞에 와 있어야 되고요. 여기 귀에 거는 부분이 귀에 걸고 뚜껑을 이렇게 닫아주셔야 됩니다. 뚜껑을 열었다가 닫아주시면 정확하게 사용하실 수 있습니다. 소개는 교육감이 잘 해주셨기 때문에 바로 넘어가도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 특강 주제는 더 나은 세상을 위한 교육, 변혁적 학습 경험으로서의 IB입니다. 콘라드 휴즈 강사님을 큰 박수로 맞이해 주십시오.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for that introduction. Great to be here in Korea. It's my first time in Korea. And I had a beautiful walk outside earlier and went up this hill where I met an old man who I was surprised to see was doing sports barefoot, no shoes on. And when he saw me, he said, Korea #1. But I was very impressed by that. And I'd like to say that when the governor introduced me, and she said I didn't know much about Korean education, that is true, I was shown a multiple choice test item that students did recently, which is very difficult. It was a description of some sort of economic theory with, I think it was 6 possible answers. And I said, I think it's either #2 or #4. And I was told the right answer was #2. So I think I might do okay in a Korean education system. This talk is about how the IB changed my life and how it's changed the life of my family, in fact. And I'd like us to come away feeling inspired about the potential, not just of the IB, but of education, to change lives and the role you have in shaping future generations. So we're going to start with you, and just think, go inside. What do you think the school of the future should look like? Imagine that you could design a school for the future. What would you want that school to be like? And think of a mission statement, so maybe just a sentence or 2 that describe what the whole purpose of that school is. Think about that. Maybe write it down. and discuss it with the person sitting next to you. That's how we're going to start. What is your school of the future like? Go from inside to something on paper, if you'd like, and then discuss it with your partner. Okay, I'll give you just about 30 more seconds. Okay, we're going to bring that to a close. That was just to get you thinking about a question we really should all be asking ourselves as educators, which is, what is the purpose of education? Why do we educate? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Would anyone like to share their mission statement? Anyone feeling brave? I need one mission statement before I carry on. Okay, I'm going to give you the mic.
지식이 풍부하고 네, 배움이 넘치고 개념 이해, 개념 기반으로 탐구하고 더 나은 평화로운 세상을 만드는 평생 학습자로 가는 IB입니다.
Inquiry, critical thinking, lifelong learning. I love that. I mean, the chances are that what you came up with has something to do with growth, something to do with the individual and the group growing and reaching out, flourishing, becoming better. I mean, education is about moving forward towards a higher place. That's my daughter. Her name's Eloise. She's a junior, so she's in the third year of university. She's 21. And I'm going to talk a little bit about her. That's my son, Melchior. He's 19. They're both very sporty. He's a basketball player. She does track and field. He's also at university. That's my wife, Estelle. So she's from Cameroon. And she runs a middle school in Oregon, in the United States. Now, I went to school in South Africa. This was in the late 1970s, a long time ago. And I hated school. I hated school with a passion. Seriously, I would sometimes cry in the car on the way to lessons. And I think it was for two reasons. One was that there was corporal punishment. They used to hit us with sticks. We called it getting the cane. And I was quite naughty. I used to get caned a lot. I had one teacher in particular. I won't mention his name. But I was terrified of him. And I don't think there was any learning that took place because of corporal punishment. You know, for hundreds of years, there's been this idea in our heads that you can get people to learn by making them afraid, by threatening them, by humiliating them, by putting pressure on them. But you don't learn anything that way. You learn how to behave a certain way, but there's no deep learning. So most of what happened in my primary school I've forgotten. But what I remember was being hit. And that's one thing I really didn't like about the school. And the other was that I didn't feel like I mattered. I didn't feel like I had any real value. There was no one who said, Conrad, I believe in you. You can do something great. I was just a pawn on a chessboard. I was just a number. So it's ironic that I'm in education today. If you'd asked me when I was about 8 years old, if I thought I'd been in education and running a school, I would have said, no way. I wanted to get away from school as quickly as possible. Now, luckily for me, my life changed because I went to an international school in Eswatini, which was called Swaziland in those days. It's a small African kingdom between South Africa and Mozambique. And this school, it's called Waterford Kamhlaba. Kamhlaba in Siswati, which is the language of Eswatini, means one world. That name was actually coined by the king of Swaziland at the time, King Sobhuza, who was the oldest regent at the time, and he also had the largest number of wives in the world. He had a palace full of wives. Yeah, I mean, so much so that he once sent one of his envoys to the school, and they saw one of our students who was about to graduate and said, the king wants you in his palace. And she left the country and went and studied in Canada to avoid that. But that's another story. Swaziland was a fantastic place. This was a wonderful education I received. Everything was different. There were no uniforms. It was co-educational, boys and girls. My primary school had been for boys only. They couldn't hit the students. And there was a real respect for who we are as human beings. And I think that's when I fell in love with education. When I was at that school, I saw a poster on the wall that looked like that. And I asked my English teacher at the time, who is that? And he laughed a little bit and he said, you don't know who that is? This was in about 1987. It was Nelson Mandela, became the president of South Africa. I'd never seen a picture of him because in South Africa during apartheid, nobody knew what he looked like. He was a banned person. Images of Mandela were hidden. So it was when I went to Waterford that I actually saw what he looked like. And his grandson, Mandla, was at the school with me. So all of a sudden, my mind was being opened. And I was growing. And I felt much more confident about the world around me. And I started to understand the political system in South Africa as well, and everything that was wrong with it at the time. I hadn't quite understood that before. Now, there was a French teacher who arrived at the school from Belgium, and his name was Monsieur Usman. And he had these piercing blue eyes and this beautiful gray hair. And he used to throw his scarf over his shoulder and write poems in French about the sound of his teeth sinking into an apple. And he was teaching French literature. And he had a small group of students who sort of became a kind of clique of poets. They were the French higher level literature students. And I said, I want to be one of his students. I want to be with this teacher. But my French was terrible. I was doing French B standard level, the lowest level of French. So I went to the school counselor, the IB diploma coordinator. I was doing the IB diploma. And I said, I'd like to do French literature high level. And she said, no, you're going to fail it. You can't do that. You have to stick with your package. And I kept going. I said, no, I want to do it. I want to learn French. I want to be with this teacher. And in the end, they gave up. They said, okay, you can go. And when I got my IB diploma, the worst score I got was French. It was the worst score on my IB diploma. However, French has been more important in my life than any other subject. It's allowed me to work and teach in France in bilingual schools. My wife's Francophone, so I met her through the language. And it was because of the power of this teacher, Monsieur Usman. And when I think back on what he taught us, it was passion. He brought his passion for literature to the highest service of his work. He was teaching us works of literature that were impossibly difficult. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert is an extraordinarily complex work of literature. We were doing Les Fleurs du Mal by Baudelaire. We were doing this novel called Topaz by Marcel Pagnol. It's very difficult literature. I couldn't understand a lot of it, which is why I didn't do very well. But there was something about him that pushed me. So I went to study in France after that. And I think he taught me subconsciously to be a teacher. So the first lesson here is, if you're running a school, if you've got children with you as a teacher or as a supervisor, as a director, make sure that there's passion, that there is love of learning happening around them, because it's infectious. It will liberate them and set them free. You know this. But sometimes we forget it because, we're talking about systems and processes and assessments and curriculum and getting through everything. But at the core of it, there's that magic. So as I said, I did the IB diploma. And some of the most wonderful memories I have of doing the IB diploma were from the core. CAS, that's creativity, activity, service. There's some schools that want to get through CAS quickly, and others that do it properly, do it deeply. And at our school, we had to go to the local children's hospital every week and play with the children there. And I had this one child who I'd look after. And it was organized in such a way that when we left, there'd be another group of students who would take over. So we weren't letting anybody down. There was a sustained relationship. I would never have had that experience, that opportunity, if it wasn't in the curriculum and if the school didn't believe that service learning was foundational in building up my values, my sense of empathy, and also opening my mind to a reality that was completely different to mine. So that had a very strong effect on me. And I went on to be a voluntary fireman in my village in Switzerland. And I think it was maybe because somewhere in the back of my head there was this idea that you should do community service. You have to help the community somehow. We're not just here to consume. So the IB diploma does this with CAS. I like music. I play the guitar. I've got some songs on Spotify. And when I was at Waterford, I did my maths studies project on the mathematics of guitar and the relationship between the tension of the string and the vibration that would create a note. So I was able to connect my love of music with a subject, mathematics. It wasn't my favorite subject, mathematics, but I really loved the maths studies project because I could bring myself into it. I could bring my passion into the subject. It wasn't me being subjected to something. I was participating in my learning. And then this theory of knowledge. That's an image of Plato, who says in his Theaetetus that knowledge is justified true belief. So I started teaching philosophy in Switzerland, invented this philosophy course with a colleague. And all along, even though, you know, as was being said, my PhD, my first PhD was in English literature. My second is in education. My background was as an English teacher. I've always wanted to teach philosophy, I think. And I was wondering where that came from the other day, and it was probably from theory of knowledge, from this course that we did, fundamentally on the difference between a fact, an opinion, and, you know, garbage, things like conspiracy theories or just making things up. And it's more necessary now than ever. If you look at what young people are getting on social media, and what a lot of adults believe as well. So doing theory of knowledge is giving a gift to young people to help them really think. And it affected me in the way that I've grown as a scholar and my teaching. You know, we talk about an education for the future and which subjects should we be teaching, and what about artificial intelligence, and what about well-being, what about social and emotional learning, what about climate change, and so on and so forth. If you think carefully, philosophy is probably one of the most future-focused subjects there is, because it's making you reflect on existential questions. What is truth? What do I want to do with my life? What is right? What is wrong? How do I know what I know? Those are eternal questions. So I went on to study in France. I was at Montpellier, which is, it's the oldest medicine faculty in Europe. And Rabelais, I don't know if you've heard of Rabelais, he's a famous French philosopher. He wrote this book called Gargantua and Pantagruel. It's about these giants that sort of represent the Middle Ages. He said, "Science sans conscience n'est que ruine de l'âme," which in French means science without conscience is the ruin of the soul. Science without conscience is the ruin of the soul. And I think that's what the core of the IB does. It's by getting you to think critically, by engaging students in service learning, in some of the internal assessment by allowing them to explore their passions, take the extended essay. I didn't talk about the extended essay. That's another area where students can really go deep and inquire. It's much more than just regurgitating facts and figures. And I thank the IB diploma and Monsieur Usman for giving me the courage to go and study a language in another country that I didn't really master. I did my English doctorate at WITS, which is in South Africa, and I wrote about J.M. Coetzee, who is South Africa's greatest novelist. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature, he won the Booker Prize twice, and my love of literature definitely came from my experience at Waterford. Not just from Monsieur Usman and then the French lessons I had, but from the type of literature that we could study. Because we did literature in translation. So it wasn't just English literature, but I studied Greek literature, Russian literature, Norwegian literature in the English course. The emphasis on international mindedness broadens students' appreciation of literature. Every student doing the IB diploma studies some form of literature. It's language and literature or literature. And that's a powerful gift. I did my Ed.D. at Durham University in the UK, and what I looked at was how education can reduce prejudice. How education can reduce prejudice. And the interesting thing is, and I published that as well, you can get it, it's a book that's been published with Routledge, is that my extended essay was in psychology, and this was about 30 years earlier, 20 years earlier, and it was on the relationship between racial prejudice, so racial bias, and political conservatism. So if you'd vote on the right or the left, was there a correlation with the way that you viewed race? It's a bit of a difficult thing to study. I designed a questionnaire and gave it to university students. I mean, I don't think it was actually a very good extended essay, but interesting that later on, I'd wind up writing a book on something similar and doing a higher degree on it. And I'm convinced that the extended essays that students write in the IB diploma it forecasts some of the big decisions they'll take in their lives professionally later on. That has to be good. In any case, it's a very, very powerful statement about the value of the IB diploma. These are the books that I wrote, and each of them has got something to do with that educational journey I took. So what experiences did you have at school that have made you the person you are today? Why don't you discuss that for a few minutes? Discuss with your partner. Some of you, I noticed last time, weren't talking to each other, so here's a second chance. It's always a good thing to get people to talk to each other, because I noticed some people were falling asleep and now they've woken up. Okay, thank you for having that discussion. And hopefully you could make some connections, see some patterns. Now that's my daughter Eloise, and she got this incredible opportunity to speak at the United Nations on her identity as a mixed race child. And when she was at school, for her personal project in the middle years program, she surprised us a little bit because she's very good academically, all around. She got, I think, 42 points in the IB. She got into a top school. She's also an athlete, you know. And we thought she'd do something quite sort of academic for her personal project. And her parents, myself and my wife, we had all sorts of ideas about what her personal project might be. But we sort of kept those to ourselves. She said, no, I want to talk about hair, about African women's hair. And we're like, really? Okay. And she did this great presentation. And she actually won a prize at school, the personal project prize. And I think it's because she put so much passion, again, and so much of herself into it. The thing I love the most about the MYP, it's the personal project. I mean, there's a lot more to talk about, and when we do the Q&A, you might have some questions about the MYP, about how you design interdisciplinary units, about the whole idea of global contexts, concepts-based learning. Those are all very interesting. But the personal project is a fantastic assessment because it's personal and because you really see these young people in an entrepreneurial, mature setting where they can be proud, no matter how good they are academically, of something. And what Eloise showed us in her presentation was very critical. It was all about African hairstyles and how it's difficult being a black woman in a white world where there are all sorts of standards about hair that often prevent women from expressing themselves the way they would in Africa. So it's quite sophisticated. And that's part of the beauty of the MYP. It's that personal project. Something else in Eloise's journey was the interdisciplinarity of her learning. The fact that she was connecting subjects through these units that were focused on some sort of higher order global issue, some sort of philosophical question, some concept. It's so much more interesting to learn that way than just to trawl through information, disembodied information. You have to connect things together. We know this in terms of cognitive psychology. It goes all the way back to Piaget. The way we learn, he called it epistemic. It's by connecting old knowledge with new knowledge, which is why the foundations in maths, for example, are so important, because if they're wrong, you're trying to accommodate new information to an erroneous premise. But if we're not thinking about connections and how we can ease those connections, we're not helping students learn. So that interdisciplinarity was something that definitely helped Eloise in her MYP experience. She's now at a school in the US called Amherst College. It's in Massachusetts. It's a liberal arts college. And she's studying neuroscience. And she won this summer school internship at EPFL, which is the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, which is a top Swiss science university. And she did it with this brilliant professor, a Japanese-American professor called Nako Nakatsuka. And this was her presentation. I don't really understand what it's about. When she tells me about what she's doing in neuroscience, I'm like, okay. But she's far ahead of me. But it's profoundly and deeply interdisciplinary. So her interdisciplinarity in the middle years program was mirroring what she would later do at university. And if you think about higher degrees, they tend to be interdisciplinary. The deeper you go into a subject, the more interdisciplinary it becomes. You know, there's a story where you have the apprentice and the master. And they're walking on the beach. And the apprentice asks the master, what is transdisciplinarity? What does transdisciplinarity mean? And the master says, look, and draws a circle in the sand, and then draws a dot on the circumference of the circle, and says, this is where you are now. Then he draws a dot in the middle of the circle, and he says, you need to go to the middle of the circle. And the best way of joining two dots is a straight line. So follow what it is you're doing and become a master. Become stronger and stronger at what you're doing. Keep going. Whether it's in the arts, whether it's in sports, whether it's in science, whether it's in maths, whether it's in the humanities. Become a master. Don't be afraid to become a master. And when you've reached the center of the circle and you look up and you turn around, you'll see the whole circumference. And he said, that is transdisciplinarity. So when we express interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity early on, what we're starting to do is mirror what will come later if we follow a path of mastery, which is making all sorts of connections. Nothing exists in isolation. I think I mentioned Eloise is an athlete. She runs the 100 meters and the 200 meters. And she was a national champion. So it sounds like I'm bragging about her, but I am. But I mean, parents do that about their children. Huh? If I had my phone, I could show you some photos as well. But anyway, she was in the top 15 in the US in D3. She got into this final competition in New York. And right now she's a student athlete. That's actually why I sent her to the US, so that she could carry on with her sports and her academic studies. Because in Europe, it's quite difficult to do that. You sort of have to choose. I think it's great when education systems allow you to follow more than one passion. You know, you're not just boxed into doing one thing. Young people have so much potential. There's so many different directions they could take. Now, you shouldn't try and do everything for too long. Otherwise, you become, as they say in English, a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Not sure how we're going to translate that one. Jack of all trades, but a master of none. But at the same time, you don't want to cut down your passion so early that you can't entertain at least two different things at the same time. So many young people have crises because, oh, my parents want me to be an engineer, but I want to be a writer. Or, I want to be an artist or a singer, but my mom wants me to be a lawyer. And they wind up becoming a lawyer just to please their parents. I've even heard stories of people who said, okay, I'm going to do my degree for my parents, and then I'll do what I really want to do. It's like, really? Why don't you let them do both? It's not impossible. That's also what interdisciplinarity is, I think. It's not having a monologic view. That's my son, Melchior, and he's a basketball player. He's on a scholarship, playing in a top basketball academy. He's a freshman, and he's doing pretty well. He's got a big match coming up on Saturday. It's great, by the way, if you have kids or when you have kids, if they're sports people, you get to watch them over the weekend. It's very entertaining. So I watch him live on ESPN. He's in NCAA matches. But I get very stressed, though. I get too involved. And my wife tells me off, but then she's even worse. She can't even watch. But anyway, so very passionate sports person. And just like his sister, when it came to his academic studies, he got to express his love of sports in the program. This was the PYP. So he was doing the primary years program. And this is personal, because we all love something different about the academic programs that we teach or we administer. But what I love about the MYP is the personal project. And what I really love about the PYP, maybe even more than in the MYP, it's that assessment that they do at the end of it, which is the group presentation. So when Melchior did this, and remember, it's in a group. You don't do it alone. And the students are sort of presenting something that they find important. It was about how sports coaches put pressure on athletes and the effect that this might have on athletes' performances. So that assessment at the end of the PYP, where you're presenting, again, something that you're interested in, how you express yourself, you're sharing your knowledge, it's very personal. And it was allowing him to make connections. And also it pushed his thinking further than I think it would have gone if it had been prescripted, because he was asking quite a difficult question. So what's the relationship between the pressure that coaches put on athletes and how athletes perform? And what was interesting was at the time, he was doing football. He was doing soccer. And he was a very talented soccer player. So much so that he got selected to be in a top team in Switzerland. But he didn't actually like it, because he liked to dribble the ball. When he got the ball, he liked to hold it and to dribble. And the coaches kept telling him, stop dribbling, pass the ball. Because they thought the team needed to play a bit like Barcelona or these teams where you're always passing. And so they're cramping him in. And then, because he could play music, and he was a good drummer, and he kind of stopped the drums. You can't do everything, but he was pretty good at drums. He was on the school band. And one weekend, he was meant to play with the school band, and he said, I can't, I have to go to the football match. And I said, come on, for once, why don't you go and play with the band? And he goes, if I miss one football match, the coach will put me on the bench for the next match. And that's where I decided to step in as a parent. I said, you know what, we're going to try a different sport. Let's try basketball, because the atmosphere in basketball is a bit different. It's quite aggressive football in Europe. And since then, he's flourished. But it's interesting, because in the back of his head, he was experiencing the coach putting too much pressure on the player, and he got to express that in the PYP. In the exhibition. So that exhibition, it's a fantastic summative assessment. I think that these are visionary assessments. It's not just lining students up and making them take tests and saying, you're the top, you're in the middle, you're at the bottom, bye-bye. I mean, what's that about? Much more interesting to say, you know, who are you? Tell me what your story is. What's your dream? What's your passion? What's your vision? Treat them like adults. What for you makes the PYP and the MYP strong preparation for the challenges of the 21st century? One more little discussion. If you didn't like talking to the person you're talking with, you can go to someone else, maybe behind you on the other side. There's some people in the back there, they're not talking to anyone, but anyway, that's okay. I'm not going to put pressure on them. And a little warning, I'm going to ask some of you to take the microphone and tell us what you're thinking. I've got some friends here with microphones walking around, so be prepared. Don't be afraid. Okay, we've got a participant at the back here who's going to share with us his thoughts on this. So I'm just going to pass the mic over here. You could say your name first, and then what your thoughts are.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 사대부초 교사 박경만입니다. 당황스럽습니다. Hi. 네. 제가 뭐 PIP 학생도 아니고 MIP 학생도 아니기 때문에 저 질문을 보고 고민을 많이 했었는데 이제 교사의 입장으로서 이런 생각을 했습니다. 21세기 도전에 대해서 강력한 대비책이 되는 게 과연 내가 아이들한테 가르치면서 무엇이 될 수 있을까를 고민해 봤었는데 기존의 교육이 무엇인가 이미 있는 지식을 아이들한테 이제 전달하는 입장이었다면 우리 학교 아이들은 무엇인가를 이제 받아들여서 내가 할 수 있는 것에 이제 집중하는 활동들을 많이 합니다. 21세기에는 새로운 시대가 오고 우리가 이제 경험하지 못한 것들이 많이 올 텐데 그 지금 이 아이들이 학교에서 하는 경험들이 계속 기존의 지식을 그저 받아들이는 것이 아니라 그것을 받아들인 것을 바탕으로 자기의 지식으로 만들고 그것을 자신의 행동으로 전이하는 경험을 많이 합니다. 그러한 경험들이 이 아이들이 21세기에 새로운 것들이 이제 다가왔을 때 이러한 경험이 그 아이가 21세기의 새로운 시대에 살아가는 힘이 될 거라고 저는 생각을 합니다. 이상입니다.
Thank you. And bravo for having the courage to stand up and say something. Anyone else like to share with us? You know, there's a problem in teaching. It's called wait time. Most teachers don't wait long enough when they ask a question. There's a study done in the UK that it's under a second wait time on average. People ask questions, they don't wait for the answers. I can wait. Here we go.
저는 DP 학교에 근무를 하고 있지만 제가 알기로 MIP와 PYP에서는 이제 learning to learn, 그러니까 배우는 방법에 대해서 좀 집중적으로 교육의 좀 중심이 거기에 있다는 느낌을 많이 받았거든요. 근데 21세기에는 이제 이 아이들이 살아갈 세상은 너무 낯선 문제들이 너무 많을 거잖아요. 낯선 상황에 처해질 거고 낯선 문제를 만나게 될 거고 그랬을 때 계속 새로운 것을 배우고 또 성장해야 되는데 그럴 때 중학교, 초등학교 때 러닝 투 런에 배웠던 것이 굉장히 러닝 투 런에 대해서 잘 배워놨던 것이 큰 힘이 되지 않을까 그런 생각이 듭니다.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Learning to learn. I agree. I think that's probably the most important 21st century competency. We have to be learning animals. You know, when my father graduated, he told me that employers would be standing outside the graduation ceremony. I mean, I don't know if it was literally or symbolically. And you basically, once you'd finished university, you had a job, you could sort of stop thinking. Well, those days are over, as we know. Otherwise, you'll get replaced by another person or a machine. You have to keep going. And also, when you're continually learning, I think your life's so much more interesting. Because you're finding out new things, keeps you inspired, keeps you going. So thank you for sharing that. Inquiry-based learning, and if you look at the authors of it, Montessori, Piaget, Vygotsky, these are fantastic philosophers of education. I think Vygotsky in particular is a sort of unsung hero of this whole idea of social constructivism, that we make meaning in communities. You know, autism, the term autism, it was coined by Piaget. There's a sort of battle going on between Piaget and Vygotsky in the early years. Vygotsky died very young, he was in his 30s. But in the early inception of his work, there were some differences in the way they viewed each other, but they were sort of constructing something together. And for Piaget, autism, being autistic, it comes from auto, meaning self. It's this inner language that a child develops that stays within them. They can't break out and make themselves understood to the outside world because they're struggling to break out of this inner language into the socialization process, which is not only about learning language, but also social codes and logic. Vygotsky thought that reason and logic was a sort of bridge. So social constructivism, young people learning together, they're learning how to come out of their inner selves and to communicate with others. They're learning the rules of society. It's so important. So I don't believe that you can teach someone a language with a robot, or that you can just dump a child in front of a screen and say that's profound learning happening. They're missing something foundational, which is learning to live together, and your ideas actually being sounded out among other people. Montessori believed this as well. You know, the whole idea of this tiered instruction where students go to different learning stations is they're always working in groups. And she wrote a book about education for peace, Maria Montessori, because she believed, as did Piaget, as did Dewey, that inquiry-based learning is actually creating a more peaceful world through something that the ancient Greeks called the phronimos. The phronimos, it's the idea that if you truly know what is right and what is wrong, you won't do what's wrong. That evil is basically ignorance, and that goodness is wisdom. Or as Plato said, it's truth, beauty, and goodness. They go together. Which is why all of these discourses today about skills without knowledge, that, oh, you don't need to know that much because you can find it through artificial intelligence or online, they're wrong. Because that's going to create ignorance. And ignorance will probably lead to what you could call evil. I mean, it's too strong a word, but this is the whole idea behind inquiry-based learning, that you're getting children to think deeply for themselves, to become autonomous, to reflect, so that they can judge situations and know the difference between right and wrong, as opposed to a didactic approach where you're just telling people what to do. They're not thinking. So you're talking about lifelong learning, about learning to think, metacognition, learning to learn, and knowing to know. That's absolutely critical. We're coming towards the end of this. So we go back to the future. Remember your first question, what will the school of the future look like? What in your mind's eye will it look like? The future starts now. The future doesn't start tomorrow. We invent the future today because the future is a thought that occurs in our mind today. The future doesn't happen in the future. The future happens in the present. And another interesting thing is the future isn't what it used to be. The future is not what it used to be. So at Ecoland, at the school where I was the Director General before I moved to Los Angeles, we created this learner passport. And the learner passport, I'll talk about it a little bit in the keynote tomorrow. It's taking what we think is really important in a young person's growth, lifelong learning, self-agency, interacting with others, interacting with diverse tools and resources, interacting with the world, multiliterateness, that's the perfective tense, literate, means you're really good at something. That's important. You have to be good at something to be confident. And transdisciplinarity, making connections, transfer. We found a way of tracking development in these areas and recognizing where this is happening in academic and non-academic subjects. So students doing sports, doing the arts, doing service learning, doing entrepreneurial work at home, they could get credits alongside their academic subjects and present a learner passport. And the passport is a donut, because the idea is everybody has got 100% already. But then some have got more of this and less of that, depending on what they've done over the last 4 years of their study. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because it's something else that I love about the IB. We developed this, and when we approached the IB, they said, you can use this to measure CAS. So instead of the CAS learning outcomes for the IB diploma, we'll let you use the Learner Passport because we became part of a group of schools that were piloting alternative assessments. So the IB allows schools that are thinking of school-based syllabuses. So this is you creating your own course. Schools that want to join one of their pilots, like there's one called the Systems Transformation Pathway, which is all about global citizenship education, to do this. And they let us use this as part of the diploma, which is really important because the students weren't being told to do more work. We were integrating it into their work. And this allowed my team to bring their creativity and their passion for student learning into the program. So if you have got some kind of vision for something that you want in one of the IB programs, you should talk to the IB. Maybe they'll let you do it. They'll let you run with it. Right now, I'm working on a pilot with a school in Singapore on a theory of knowledge module that any student can do, whether they do the IB or not. And for us, it's important because we do the IB and the French baccalaureate, two systems together. And we're trying to find things that are common to both. So we're not duplicating work, and we're not creating two separate streams, but one stream. Or if you like, one tree, two branches, which I discovered on my flight here, watching The Karate Kid. No, that was meant to be a joke. Okay. One of the problems we have in the world today, it's polarization. People not talking to each other or blaming each other, pointing fingers. Maybe this is as old as the hills. But we need an education system that's helping us learn to live together, to be kind, to be good listeners, to interact with each other and not against one another. The learner profile, it's an opportunity for you in an IB program. This is how I see it, to bring out what you think is important. I don't think the learner profile is saying everybody has to be a risk taker, knowledgeable, caring, reflective, communicator, principled, balanced. No, I mean, it's more, what's my vision for my school? You know, I really want us to think about balance. We're going to push this. I really want students to be deep thinkers. And yes, knowledgeable is important, and risk-taking is important, but this is really where we want to go. Or maybe it's, you know, we're going to have a special program on open-mindedness. Or we're going to run debate in several languages and mock trials and model United Nations, and we're really going to push communication. It's a chance for you to express your vision. When the IB was first started at the International School of Geneva in the 60s, it was with a vision. There was a vision. That's a photograph in 1971 in our Greek theater of the very first student receiving the very first IB diploma. It was a great moment. And in those days, students did the IB diploma alongside it was called College Board at the time. It was the precursor to the advanced placement. So they had a lot of work. And that's Lord Mountbatten handing out the first diploma. And what he said of that moment was, it was the final contribution that he would help make towards the prevention of World War III. You can read that in Schools Across Frontiers by Alec Peterson. I know that Keith knows that book well. So let's not forget that if we're doing an IB program, at the core of it is the idea of an education for peace. But the way you get there is quite subtle. It's by getting students to think. It's by letting them express themselves. It's teaching them to learn with each other. What is your vision for your school? Each of you here is a leader. What do you want? What is your vision? You have to look further. Look to the distance. Where do I want my students to go? What do I want my school to be remembered for and as? What is the difference that makes the difference in my school? What is the difference that makes the difference? And then, how do I get my team, and maybe you're part of a team, to work together towards that vision? How do I get the heart to follow the mind? Sometimes we get teachers together in planning meetings and they look bored, they want to go home. Just cancel that meeting. Don't do it. Don't keep people back in the afternoon. They don't want to be there. Find something that really makes them excited and work on that. Work on their passions. And let them bring themselves into the program as well. Don't just tell them what to do. Open up some space for them to express themselves. That's what happened to us with the Learner Passport. It was a collaborative project, a little bit like students doing a personal project or a PYP exhibition or an extended essay. We have to treat each other that way as well. And you can do it with the IB program. In the subjects that you offer, the curriculum choices that you make, the IDUs that you design, it's an opportunity for creativity. It's an opportunity to work together. And finally, the gut, your passion, your chi. What is it that's driving your program? Where's the energy? If you're a leader in a school, you're a meta leader. You're a leader of leaders. You're not just leading things on the ground, you're leading people to lead. I like this quote from Condoleezza Rice. Inspiring other people to become leaders themselves. So yes, we've got the PYP, we've got the MYP, we've got the DP. But that's not the point. It's about what you're going to do with those programs. What is going to be special about those programs? What are you going to bring out? What are you going to emphasize? And how? I remember, often teachers, when they asked what their challenge is, they say, I don't have enough time. Don't have enough time. I've got a question to that. Why? I mean, you've got as much time as I do, right? So if I've got enough time, why don't you have enough time? That's a choice. What are you doing that's taking up your time? I remember reading through some feedback once, and a colleague said, I feel like a hamster on a wheel. I feel like a hamster on a wheel. And the thought that was in my head was, well, don't. Don't feel like a hamster on a wheel. Get off the wheel. Get off. You don't have to be on that wheel. You've heard of rocks, pebbles, sand. The sand, it's all the small stuff. Answering emails, marking papers, doing a preparation, going to meetings. You have to do it, and it's important. But if that's all you do, there's not much space for anything else, like your projects, which will be your pebbles, or the big thing that you want to design. You want to be creative. That's your big rock. What is your big rock? You have to start with your rock. You start with, what do I want to achieve in this program? What do I want the school of the future to look like? And you commit to that. And if you can't fit in all of the sand, it's okay. Someone might come up to you and say, did you get my email today? Yeah, I'll answer it in a couple of days. It's okay, just calm down. Because we're not just here answering emails. If we are, I'm not even going to go to work. I'll just stay at home in front of my screen. No, we have to do something special, which means you have to put your passion first. We invented this philosophy course at my school, and it meant some things had to be pushed out the way. So you can't do everything exactly the same. You have to make some decisions and think, what are we going to do in my school that's special? Put that up front. Have your big rock in your mind. When you go back to work, think, what is my vision for the future of the school? What do I want in my program, in the class I'm teaching, the school I'm running? It can happen at any level. And how am I going to get there? How are we going to get there? So at the end of the day, I think education, it's the most wonderful profession you can be in. And you must feel that way too, if you're here today. Because we're dealing with human beings, we're dealing with dreams, we're dealing with the future. And that's pretty inspiring. So it's up to us to take our programs, to take our teaching and learning, to put our passion to the highest service of our work, and to make the world a better place. Thank you.
네, DP, MIP, PIP 관련해서 콘라드 박사 본인과 자녀의 삶이 잘 연결된 모습이 참 인상적이었습니다. 그리고 시간의 선택 문제를 말씀하셨는데요. 이제 휴식 시간을 한 30 정도 가집니다. 시간을 선택 잘 하셔서 좋은 질문을 QR코드를 통해서 질문해 주시고 또 좀 이따가는 생생한 현장 질문도 받도록 하겠습니다. 시간 동안 잘 연구해 주시고 잠시 쉬고 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다. 5시 10분입니다. 5시 10분부터 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 5시부터 하겠습니다. 좀 당겨서 5시부터 시작하겠습니다. 좀 이따가 그 현장 질문을 드리면 답변을 하실 텐데 그 마이크가 들리는지 안 들리는지 궁금하셔서 이렇게 마이크를 치시는 경우가 있는데요. 그러면 이제 라이브가 송출되기 때문에 그대로 전달이 됩니다. 그래서 그냥 알아서 여기서 세션들이 알아서 이렇게 소리 높여줄 테니까 그거 좀 주의 좀 부탁드리겠습니다. 우리 IB학교 선생님들은 시간을 잘 지키십니다. 그죠? 그래서 자리에 앉아주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 그러면 안내드린 대로 지금부터 질의응답 시간을 가지도록 하겠습니다. 지난 2주간 그 학교 현장에 사전 질문을 드렸고 받았고요. 그 중에서 질문을 유혹해서 5개 정도로 축약하였습니다. 그래서 박사님께서 어제 이 질문지를 보시고 이 중에서 한 몇 가지 정도는 답변을 오늘 드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그러면 콘라드 박사님의 사전 질의와 그리고 응답 내용을 한번 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your coffee. I was just commenting to my hosts here that I thought maybe this was a room of students of education because you all look very young. And I think I know why. It's the chicken broth. You see, Keith took me for lunch to have chicken broth, this boiled chicken. Hamgeta. Yeah, it was fantastic. And he said that, you know, for Korean people, this gives you a lot of energy and force. So that must be why you all look so young. Okay. So we've got some questions here. Big questions, good questions, and I'm going to try and answer them. And I hope that you feel you can ask more questions as we go along. So the first one is, in the age of AI, are we in the age of AI? Anyway, which competencies of the IB learner profile will be most emphasized in the future? Then the second is, what MYP experiences do you consider most vital for fostering development of global citizenship? So I'm going to start with the first question, because there are two questions there. And I've written quite a lot about this. And you can find what I've written online. Most of it's been with UNESCO. And you know, when we talk about technology, new technologies, disruption, and increasingly rapid cycles of disruption, I think there's a superficial answer and there's a deeper answer. So the superficial answer, it's a technical answer. You need to know how to work with AI. You need to understand how AI works. Students should be learning with and through new technologies. It seems obvious. But the problem is this. I said earlier, the future isn't what it used to be. So about 10 years ago, everybody was saying that the language of the future is coding. That coding should be compulsory in schools. Everybody should learn coding. But guess what? Now, you can get AI to create code through natural language. So is coding still the language of the future? Or was it the language of the future? Larry Sanger, who was the co-founder of Wikipedia, and by the way, when Wikipedia came out, there was a whole noise about it, a bit like AI. Oh, it's terrible, and you know, it's not a proper encyclopedia, and students are going to go straight onto Wikipedia and this and that. When he was asked what had helped him develop Wikipedia, It's interesting the answer he gave. He said it wasn't all of the lessons he did in Word Perfect. Word Perfect was a computer program in the 1980s or maybe 70s, one of the earlier computer programming courses that you could do at school. He said it wasn't that, it was my courses in history. Because he had something foundational and transferable. So to come back to this question and the answer, in my mind, it's if you look at the learner profile, knowledgeable is one of them. Knowledgeable. And I think that that is going to be even more important in the future. Because, one, who's going to fact check AI? Who is going to be the arbitrator, the judge, who can stand back and look at what AI is generating and say, no, that's wrong, that's imprecise. That's not exactly the right answer. It's people who know. So there will be demand for that. And secondly, if you look at the way AI is developing, and where many are forecasting it'll be around 2028, 2030, it's agentic intelligence, general intelligence. So sort of white-collar type intelligence where you can onboard AI to design a whole project in your company. So it can replace lots of different people. Now, to create such powerful AI, companies are going to be using experts to create new semantic fields that AI will scrape. Because right now, AI is scraping the World Wide Web, which is part of why it's so clunky in what it comes up with. It's part of the reason why. There's some groups already like Khanego, which has been created by Salman Khan, Khan Academy. It's a little bit like Google Scholar as opposed to Google. It's a semantic field that's been curated by experts, so it's at a higher level. So the quality of AI that you're getting out of it is superior. So the people who are going to be used to generate those semantic fields will be experts. They'll be outstanding in their field and they'll know a lot. So it's counterintuitive, but you're going to need to know a lot in the future. And not say like, oh, you know, AI can do it and I'm skilled. I'm just a critical thinker. You can't be a critical thinker if you don't know anything. It's like saying you're going to tie your shoelaces before you put your shoes on. So knowledge is going to be very important. I also think another vitally important AI competency, it's inquiry. But not because of AI. Because to me, I'm not sure AI is actually going to be the problem. AI is something extraordinary that is advancing capacity, and intelligent, creative people are going to be able to use it to go even further, as you must know, because when you're doing high-powered work and you use AI, you can take it even further. The problem, it's more us putting ourselves to sleep with Netflix, with series, with entertainment, with TikTok, with Instagram, with selfies, with scrolling. You know, that is dulling our sense of genuine inquiry. And there's some studies that have shown this. There was a study done out of MIT not long ago, and it's pretty convincing. It's a randomized controlled trial, if I remember correctly, showing that this sort of excessive use, not only of screens, but of scrolling and social media, it is dulling cognitive acuity. So inquiry is important, being curious, wanting to find out for yourself. You go for a walk, you've got the ocean, you've got the mountains, you've got trees, and you're stuck on your phone like this? That's terrible, I think. So, you can look at your phone all day long. Why do you want to have the thing in front of you when there's a whole world to discover? So to me, trying to create that spirit of inquiry, of interest outside of screens is important. And of course, AI means that we have to be inquisitive because people are going to be able to manipulate information, use deep fakes. It's going to be very difficult to know what's true and what isn't true anymore. And so that original spirit of autonomous thinking and inquiry is very important. There's the future that's coming, and then there's the future that we want. Those are two different things. The future that's coming is driven by economics and markets. The future we want is, as educators, it's about human flourishing. It's about human thought, learning to live together. It's a different type of future. So we have to create that future by really finding innovative ways of driving knowledge, inquiry. All of the learner passport attributes are important, but I think those two stand out. And so my whole thesis about AI is that you need to know more, not less. And your inquiry, your criticality really needs to be pushed. I always say AI, it's where our thinking starts and not where it ends. AI is where our thinking starts and not where it ends. So we designed a policy in Geneva on AI, and we're designing one in Los Angeles right now. And we did it with some of the work by UNESCO's International Bureau of Education. UNESCO's done quite an interesting paper on artificial intelligence. There's an online sort of policy that keeps getting updated that you can use. I think it's pretty good. We have some tips for teachers. For example, give an exam question to AI, see what the answer is, and then get students to discuss the answer and how they could improve it. Or if you're going to brainstorm, so think of all the possible ways that something could be done, do the initial brainstorming with AI, look at what it's come up with, and then try and find more. The other day, well, not the other day, it was a couple of months ago, I was at Model United Nations. I don't know if any of you know Model United Nations, or if you do Model United Nations. It's a wonderful program where children learn the language of diplomacy, they debate international global problems, they draft resolutions, they vote for or against them. It was actually designed by the same person who was behind the inception of the IB, Robert Leach, in Geneva in the 50s. But students, they need to give speeches of 2 minutes each. And for many years, I've chaired this. I've been a chairperson, listening to the different student speeches. And the last one, every student's speech was exactly 2 minutes. I was like, wow, it's exactly 2 minutes. How did they do that? And then I noticed that a lot of them were saying the same thing. They were saying, we stand on the threshold of. Dear delegates, we stand on the threshold of. Dear Mr. Chairperson, honorable delegates, we, the delegation of X, stand on the threshold of, and I was like, hold on. They're using AI. It's obvious. They're saying the same thing. It's all exactly 2 minutes. No one had told them don't use AI, so why not? But what was coming out, there was no originality. And at first, the speeches sounded great, but when you listen carefully, it was like, they're not actually their speeches. I don't know if you've recently had someone send you either a mail at work or maybe a summary of a meeting you had. And you've got these little icons next to each sentence, like a little finger pointing or, let's say hi. It's like, oh, okay. You don't even feel like reading it anymore. It's like, did you do this or not? Because if you didn't do it, am I even interested? I don't know, that's how I feel. So I think human beings, we're going to want genuine knowledge, genuine inquiry, humanity. It's not even what's going to be useful or not. It's what we want ourselves. We'll see. But there's something so sterile about completely artificially generated products. Now, using that to take your thinking further, using that as a means to an end, building on it, adding the human touch, discussing it, that's more interesting. Knowledge inquiry. Then I've got another one. What MYP experiences do you consider most vital for fostering the development of global citizenship? So first of all, what is global citizenship? Citizen. Okay. Citizen of what? Hannah Arendt, the great European German philosopher, she said you can't be a global citizen because you can't get a global passport. You can't serve military service for the world. You're the citizen of a country. Now, I believe in global citizenship, but I think we have to be careful that we're not creating supranational global elites who aren't attached to anything. You're just going to float around the world. Maybe they won't pay taxes. They're cosmopolitans. Is that what we want? Or do we want people who are citizens in their countries with a sense of moral duty and ethical obligation, but they're open-minded? And there are different types of global citizenship. There's critical global citizenship, radical global citizenship, neoliberal global citizenship. It's a word that's used a lot. It's not always defined. But if it is about open-mindedness, about caring for other human beings, and having some interest in other cultures and feeling that you can connect with other people, even if they're from a different culture, then I think that service learning is very important. I spoke about CAS and the effect that CAS had on me as a student. But the beautiful thing in the IB programs is you've got service learning in all three. And so I would certainly implore you in your schools to get value out of service learning. I always call it serving to learn and learning to serve. Serving to learn. So you're not coming and saying like, oh, I'm going to help someone else and that's it. You're learning from them. And you're learning to serve, to actually make some kind of impact on someone else's life or another community's life. I think that's an important development. If global citizenship is about empathy, is about thinking about other people, moving away from yourself. And another thing about service learning is very often, if you give students agency, if you let them drive their service learning and think about what's important to them, they'll come up with the themes that are really interpolating Gen Alpha. For example, the climate change, which clearly from a global citizenship perspective, that is a global problem, and it is something at a local level we should be thinking about. It's a global problem, but we can tackle it locally. So when you let students go, often they want to get involved in environmental custodianship. Interacting with the world. You must have something like that in your school. We've got a green club. We've got students who are very passionate about doing something to help with climate change. Even if it's a drop in the ocean, they want to be involved because they feel connected to that global problem. So if you give them some agency in service learning, they can make an impact there. How are the answers going so far? 5 is they're going really well, 1 is they're terrible. Show me quickly your hands. I got some 5s up here. They think it's so bad they're not even putting their hands up. 1. Okay, thanks. These are just my answers. You've all got answers to these questions yourselves. Second one, regarding the PYP, are there any specific points or elements that you feel IB PYP educators should prioritize or give special attention to? That's an interesting question. So, again, I think take the PYP and you've got a curriculum framework, you've got the exhibition, you've got these units of inquiry. You need to put out there what you think is important for your school, for your identity, your sense of purpose. I don't think there's any one answer. I love the exhibition. I think if you're going to do the exhibition, do it really well. Make it special, make it stand out. For years, our exhibitions are always the same. It was students standing at little sort of parts of the room, or sometimes in front of a desk, with posters behind them. And some of the posters didn't look great. And then all the parents would come, and they'd try and look interested in meeting, 20, 30 different kids, and then they'd go, and all the posters would wind up in the bin. And we thought, well, how can we do something different? So we started by making it into a whole event. So we'd start with a concert where the whole graduating PYP cohort would sing a song, and the music department led it. And that kind of was uplifting. And then at the end of it, we took 3 PYP exhibition projects that we thought were really interesting. It's not a competition, but maybe expressing something quite specific. And we had everyone come and watch a kind of TED Talk sort of performance by the students, just of those 3, to model a kind of excellence. So there we were trying to make the exhibition a bit different. There's something else in the PYP which I love. It's not talked about enough, I think. It's the PYP attitudes. So, we talk about the learner profile, but there is something called the PYP attitudes. And they're just a set of values that we should always be thinking about when we're driving the program. And these are they. It's appreciation, commitment, confidence, cooperation, creativity, empathy, enthusiasm, independence, integrity, respect, tolerance. Now, those are beautiful. There are 12 of them. Those are called the attitudes. And the way that you develop the attitudes is it's how you want to drive the culture of your school. But the most important thing, I think, in question 2 is you feeling that you have the space to prioritize what your students love, what your school loves, what makes your school stand out. Right, question 3. In what ways can IB education and artificial intelligence meaningfully interact? Could you provide some insights into how AI will shape the future trajectory of IB education? Now, I can only speak partially for what the IB is planning, but I know quite a lot about it. As you probably know, the diploma program is at some point going to go into e-assessment. We've been talking about this for a long time. So it means that students aren't writing exams anymore. It's done via computers, which will be very interesting because it's going to change the role of handwriting in education, you're going to start wondering, well, what are we actually handwriting for? I think handwriting is important. You know, there's studies that show that when you're taking notes and you're writing with a pen, as some of you are here, you're forcing your brain to transfer and integrate the information. When you're speed typing, it goes so quickly, you're not, I mean, I'm not saying it's automatically the case, but you're not necessarily thinking as much. It's just sort of going through you. And then are you actually going to read your notes? When you're writing them down, there's some mental processing going on. So when the IB moves to e-assessments, it's going to be challenging us to think about handwriting in education. And then there's the AI piece, which is obviously around plagiarism, AI detection software. You know, when you hand pieces of work in terms of the internal assessment with the IB diploma now, there are two types of plagiarism checking that are used. There's a general one, which is plagiarism detection. Turnitin.com it's called. And so this will show up the probability of a piece of work being plagiarized or not. And if it finds something that matches a published piece of work, it'll show exactly what it is. And there's a tolerance that's allowed. Beyond that, we've got a problem. It means a student might have plagiarized. And now more recently, they've asked us to also use AI plagiarism detection. But the software is not very good. I know because I've had my own theory of knowledge students write their essay in the classroom in front of me, because we really work on it together, and then get told that, you know, huge sections of it were done by AI, but they weren't done by AI. But if you think about it, if you took the speech I'm making now and you were to transcribe it and ask what percentage of it you could find somewhere on the World Wide Web, you'd probably find quite a lot. I mean, it's very difficult to fault a student on that. So I think that it's going to be a problem. Let me put it that way. I think that if we've got a traditional assessment model where we want, and we should want, academic honesty, you have to find a different way of assessing it than through internal assessment, which is going to be done on computers, or even in a computerized examination environment. So things like the oral, a viva voce. You know, the viva or the viva voce goes all the way back to the medieval period, and it's still the way that you assess a doctorate, is you have to defend your thesis orally. You have to get up and answer questions. You can't really use AI for that. So that might become more important. I think what we need to be is creative in the types of assessments that we give. You take theory of knowledge. Some of you know theory of knowledge. You've got two assessments, the essay and then the exhibition. And the exhibition in theory of knowledge is you take three objects that you choose, things that are meaningful to you, and then you discuss them using a prompt. That's quite difficult to cheat on, in inverted commas, using AI, because it's not general, it's not generic, it's specific to something that's personal to you. So I think the more we think about assessments that are almost impossible to cheat on, the more we'll be pushing genuine human creative thought. And then AI is going to shape the future trajectory of all education, whether we like it or not, because students are going to access it, teachers are accessing it. You've got parents now complaining about teachers using it for comments because they're trying to take shortcuts. And increasingly, administrators are using it with these little icons next to each sentence. It's like, come on, that's AI. So I think if you're going to use AI, say that you're using it, and then have some human touch over and above it. I don't have a quick and easy answer to that. I mean, it's a big theme. We have to make sure students are reading, that they're writing, that they're thinking, because they're going to be using AI anyway. So that's almost like an antidote to strengthen them as they use AI. And then when you can use AI in the classroom, use it intentionally, use it creatively, use it intelligently. To me, technology in education is not about saying everybody's got a laptop. There we go. So, well, so what? I mean, no. Have a STEM center. Let them do 3D printing, laser cutting, augmented reality, robotics, things that are interesting, things that they can't access outside of school. So they're like, wow, I love coming to school because we can do this. And something I've never understood. It's like, I like art, but when you make children draw graphs in geography, I think, I mean, when are they going to learn Excel? Never. I used to be quite proud of myself because I could do pivot tables, which is not a big deal, but in Excel, if you can do pivot tables, if you can draw a pivot table of a graph, you can come up with some interesting conclusions. Now AI can do it. I mean, you have to double check, but even that's not useful. So I don't know how to answer that question, but I think don't hold students back when technology can take them further, but don't let technology take over their learning. You've got to balance that out. And the adult in the room, the teacher, needs to make that decision. I think schools need to give teachers some agency with AI. A lot of young teachers, like everybody in this room, who's so young. I'm just waiting for the joke to kick in. Well, it's not actually a joke. I mean it, but they can use AI a lot better than sometimes administrators and superintendents. And so, let them. There's a generational thing. Younger teachers are often connected with learners on themes like technology, belonging, diversity, equity, inclusion, in ways that that you need to let them run with. So we've got an AI policy. I think schools need to have an AI policy. They need to make up their mind about it. Be creative, be ethical, be critical. This one, I mean, look, I can't really answer it because I don't know the Daegu or the Korean national curriculum that well. But I'm going to just say a few things about it. Many IB educators in Daegu find themselves navigating the complexity of integrating the Korean national curriculum and the IB framework. For a teacher embracing this challenge to foster global awareness and deeper thinking in Korean students, what core beliefs and educational philosophy should sustain them? So what's interesting here is, in a way, the question answers itself. Because, and I mean, I like it. It's a good question. I'm not trying to sort of poo-poo the question, but it starts by saying, how do you navigate the difficulty between the Korean national curriculum and the IB? And then it says deeper thinking, core beliefs, educational philosophy. And this is just this is completely connected to what I believe, which is that a great educational experience, it's actually, despite everything I said about the PYP and the MYP and the DP, it's curriculum agnostic. It doesn't matter what you do, because a great teacher is a great teacher. Whether they're teaching AP, A-levels, IB, French baccalaureate, the Matura, the Korean national system. I mean, curriculum is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. The most important impact on student learning is the teacher. There are lots of studies that show this. There's greater variability in student learning outcomes within a single school between teachers because of teaching quality than if you compare schools and districts and even national systems. Obviously, if you start sort of aggregating the data, you can say, oh, this country does better than that one. But for a student experience, we all know this. The teacher's quality is what comes first. Now, it's difficult when you're doing two systems, and I think you should try and find a way of unifying them, designing something that all students can do. So if you think theory of knowledge is really important, and that's about critical thinking, then find a way for all students to be engaged in critical thinking. I do not believe that there's any curriculum out there that will stop a passionate teacher from creating critical thinking in their students. Critical thinking is done by the type of questions that you ask. take question stems. You convert the what into why. So instead of saying, how many legs does a spider have? You say, why does a spider have 8 legs? You can actually give them the answer. Instead of saying, what is the color of the sky? You say, why is the sky blue? That's got nothing to do with the curriculum. That's got to do with the way the teacher is thinking through what they want to get out of the students. If I've been given a very prescriptive curriculum, so they need to do this and that, and you've got a lot more flexibility, I can still find a way through a teaching method of curating student creativity, student passion. There's a great teaching method. It's called the jigsaw classroom. I'll talk about it briefly at my keynote tomorrow. I see some people nodding their heads. The jigsaw classroom, it was designed by Elliot Aronson in the 70s after desegregation in the United States, because that was a disaster. They're just busing black kids into white schools, and there was no scaffolding. They were just dumped in these schools. And Elliot Aronson, who was at Princeton, I think, doesn't matter where he was, but he was a researcher in the sociology of education, and he went to these schools and he saw that it was the teacher, it was basically bad teaching, which is hands up. So here's a question, and like, me. Yes, 2 + 2 equals 4. Good boy. I mean, what's the point of that? So you knew the answer. I confirm that you know the answer. None of the others get to say anything. What's 2 + 2? 3. No, wrong. No, instead it should have been like, oh, what makes you say that? That's interesting. So he saw that the pedagogy was very stilted and that the students weren't communicating with each other. So he said, well, why don't you get them to teach each other? And that's how the jigsaw classroom works. So you split the class up into small groups. They have to do some research into what it is they're meant to be learning. And then you split the groups up again so they teach each other. And then you give them an assessment, a test at the end. And from there you see what they know and what they don't know. So that's just a creative, pedagogic way of getting content across. It doesn't have to be because you're doing X or Y curriculum. I think a good teacher is always thinking about varying the learning experiences, doing fluid grouping, tiered instruction, differentiation, so different levels of task. I mean, that's master teaching, as opposed to just doing the same thing for everybody. Bang, that's it. And then what core beliefs in educational philosophy should sustain them? What's your educational philosophy? Something I love, it's mastery learning. So what you do, I've tried this a few times. You can't do it all the time. But it's quite a crazy method, actually. You give the student an essay. They give you their answer. You mark it. Usually when you're marking something, it's good to keep the grade back, get the student to mark the work themselves, show them, they need to show you what they gave themselves, and then you give them the grade. Because we know that grades, they wash out learning, because it's about status and not about learning. You don't read the feedback when you see the grade. It's like, I got an A, what did you get? You got a B. And it's like, why didn't I get an A? I only got a B. There's no learning going on there. So if you starve them of the grade, it's better. But even better in mastery learning is you give them a grade, and imagine it's a C or something. Then they do it again. They do the essay again with some guidelines on how to get a better grade until they get a B. And then you give it to them again, the same thing. And they do it until they get an A, every single student. So for that one essay, as I said, you can't do it all the time. They might do it, or some students might do it, you have to differentiate, up to 3 times. So that they can model perfection, so they can see excellence, so they actually taste what it's like to get that A. Instead of constantly leaving them with a B or a C or a D and just moving ahead. That's got nothing to do with the curriculum. That's an educational philosophy. You could do it. How was that answer? 5, great answer. 3 okay, 1 terrible. I'm getting some 5s over here. People are very polite. You're very polite. I'm sure some of you don't think I was worth a 5. Oh, thank you. Last one. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking here. So I hope that there's some questions, some more questions, or some disagreement. Teacher agency is a crucial element in implementing the IB educational philosophy and establishing it as a core value of the school culture. And establishing it as a core value of school culture is a fundamental responsibility for all IB school leadership. That's good, that's true. Teacher agency. Teachers are happier, they're more productive, they work better when they've got some freedom. That's just what human beings are like in general. I mean, freedom is a culturally relative term. But I think letting people take some kind of decision universally is probably going to make them a bit happier. I don't think that's a contentious thing to say. However, overemphasizing autonomy without supporting structured professional development, such as in-depth training, critical instructional supervision, and mentoring, risks undermining program consistency and educational quality. That's true too. You have to walk before you can run. Given this tension, how should IB school leadership effectively balance fostering innovative teacher initiative with maintaining high educational standards and program integrity? Great question. Very good question. To me, this is about teacher training, teacher onboarding, teacher support. It's a leadership question. So any good leader has to think about the cycle of human capital in terms of advertising, recruiting, onboarding, nurturing, professional development, growth. Can you grow as a teacher? And then exiting, your pension, wherever you're going next. And when a new teacher arrives, someone who's new to the teaching profession or new to the program, they need some mentorship. They need some support. And there are different ways you can do this. One is to have trained staff in your faculty who are actually allocated to new teachers to guide them. So that's what we've got in the International School of Los Angeles. Through our French system, you've actually got a special training course for master teachers who become mentors for junior teachers. You might have something similar in Korea, but I think that helps. There's also distributed leadership. So the span of control of a leader is usually something between 10 and 12 people. I've met people who say I supervise 200 people. I'm like, really? What, you line manage 200 people? You're doing 200 evaluations every year? No, you have to break that down into teams. So the department head or the year level head, if it's a primary school, is working with a team of maybe 5 to 10 teachers. Now, sometimes this is difficult for financial reasons. But if you've got that model, then you've got someone looking after people carefully. I've got a system that I really believe in, and I did it in Geneva, I'm doing it in Los Angeles. It's called 1-to-1 for everyone. 1-to-1 for everyone. It means every student has at least 2 check-ins with one adult every year on their learning. So like a mentor or a homeroom teacher. And every adult has at least 1-to-1 with their supervisor every year. Because I realized in my years of leadership, I was coming across some people who'd never been evaluated. They said, I've never spoken to the boss. No one's ever come and told me, are you doing a great job? Never. I was really shocked. Or, it happened once and then it didn't happen again. It needs to be done consistently. And it can be positive. It doesn't have to be a threatening conversation. It can be a growth, coaching conversation. But you have to accompany people. Teachers need to feel that you care about them and that either you or someone who's in your team, remember you're a meta leader, you're leading others to lead, is looking after them. And then that you differentiate. If they're strong, if they're not so strong, if they're new, if they're quite senior in the profession, if they're looking for some kind of change. So I don't think you can take someone who's new to the program and just say, off you go, do what you want. That's not fair. You have to give them some guided support. But master teachers, you can let them go a little bit. There must always be that feedback. I don't know if you've heard of John Hattie. So, I mean, he's done some great work. And one of his, I think, his best papers he wrote in 2008 with a scholar called Helen Timperley. And this was out of the University of, I think it was at Melbourne, or maybe it was Sydney at the time. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's called The Power of Feedback. It's a 2008 paper. And I still use that model in teaching and in leadership. He says, because feedback's so important in learning, right? There are 4 levels of feedback. For beginners, it's task specific. So if you're a new professional, you're getting a lot of feedback on tasks. Okay, I want you to go and teach this lesson, try this, and let's talk about how it went. This week, why don't you explore, trying, let's say, tiered intervention, or why don't you explore this idea of diagnostic assessment. Come back and let's see how it goes. So it's close quarters, regular feedback, because they're beginners, they need support. It's the same with students. If a student's struggling, you chunk the feedback. You give them very specific feedback. Okay, just focus on that sentence. Let's just look at that sum. Let's, bit by bit. That's level 1. Level 2, it's process-related feedback. So that means you're a bit stronger. Go away and teach that unit, and in 4 weeks, we'll check in and see how it went, because you're a bit more autonomous, so I don't need to see you as much. And it's the same with students. Let's look at this whole essay, or let's look at the whole project that you did, and discuss it. Let's look at the way that you're using certain stylistic features, or the way that you are tackling this concept. It's at a higher level. It's process-related, because they're a bit more comfortable. That's level 2. And then level 3, it's the highest level. It's metacognitive feedback. Metacognitive feedback, which means that they're so good that you're more like a sort of Socratic questioner. How do you think that went? What did you notice? Tell me what you thought. That's, if you look at high-performing athletes, or sometimes it's, if you look at track and field, long jumpers, high jumpers. The high jumper or the long jumper knows what they want. They go back to the coach, and they tell the coach what they want. Like, where do I need to put my starting point? Because in long jump, you need to tag where you start running from, or how much closer to the jump should my step be? So they know what they want, and the coach is actually answering them. So if you get to that high level of flourishing, you're really respecting the person in front of you, student or adult, and you're giving them a lot of agency, and they get from you something that helps them, because we're there to serve as well. You see? So that's level 3. And then the 4th level of feedback, it's self. And that's in a completely different category. It's about your ego. It's about your sense of self-worth. So it's when you go to a student and you say, I can see that you've worked really hard on this, and that you've put your soul and your passion into it, and I just want you to know that. I see that, I recognize it. Or you tell an adult, I can see that this is really important to you. I can see that this matters, and let's look at it together. It's like saying, that was a fantastic piece of work. What you did there was incredible. I believe in you. But you can't throw it around too much. Otherwise it becomes cheap and it doesn't mean anything anymore. And students need to hear it from teachers and from the school, not from their parents. Because their parents are probably telling them that all the time. Oh, you know, you're great and wonderful. No, or maybe not. But they need to hear it from a third party, from that source of authority. So I'm always saddened when I see teachers, colleagues, who are just a bit too hard, you know. And it's, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you're not concentrating. Da-da-da-da. When they're talking about students, oh, he's not going to pass and they'll never manage, and it's not the right program. And you think, wow, it's so negative. I mean, is anyone in this place going to see something positive about this kid and tell them? Because if you don't get that ego-related feedback, and it should be positive, it's difficult to lift yourself up. So you think about that when you're dealing with other human beings, 4 levels of feedback. And what's even better in John Hattie's model is that those 4 levels happen at 3 different phases. So it's actually 4 times 3, 12. It's feed up, feed back, feed forward. So feed up is the first question is, where am I going? Do you know what you were meant to do? Sometimes we rush into feedback, but I didn't even know what the task was. I didn't even understand what I was meant to do. So let's establish that first. Do you know what you're meant to be doing? Is it clear? That's feeding up. Then you feed back. Okay. How did this go? How did that go? You could have done this differently. Try this, try that. You differentiate that according to the levels. And then you feed forward is, what do we do next? So you look at things like parent-teacher conferences or written feedback. Often there's too much. Like, you know, when a teacher writes lots of comments and gives it back to the student, they think, oh, that's great, but it's too much. You should just have maybe 1 or 2 or maximum 3 points to feed forward, to do next, so that you can get that in your head. Because we've got very poor working memory. We can't deal with more than about 3 pieces of information at once in general. We know that from cognitive psychology. So, sorry, this is a long answer, but what I'm trying to say here is differentiate support. Differentiate support. But there has to be high educational standards. There has to be program integrity. I don't know about you, but I'm not so keen on getting a student who makes spelling mistakes and then sticking it on the wall to say, ah, look. It's like, come on. Put something on the wall when it's spelled right. Otherwise, what message are you telling the kid? Oh, it's okay, you know, you can make mistakes. Mistakes are good, but you're not going to display the mistake. I mean, that's humiliating. You're going to display excellence. Sometimes we get things mixed up a little bit and you lose the integrity and the rigor of the program. It doesn't have to be miserable. It can be positive. So one more question down here. No, finished. Oh, look. I like the sound of my voice so much. I've just spent 50 minutes. Probably not a good thing, but I hope that you found those answers. I hope that you agreed with some of what I said. Let me put it that way.
네. 보이시는 질문은 5가지지만 저 하나 포함된 질문들은 무수히 많습니다. 끝까지 답변을 최선을 다해주신 콘랄 박사에게 박수를 한번 듣겠습니다. 자, 시간이 많지 않은 관계로 여기 현장 질문, Q&A에 꽂힌 현장 질문 한두 개만 받고 그 다음 일정을 이어가도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그러면 시간이 많지 않습니다. 한두 분만 질문을 받도록 하겠습니다. 여기 있습니다. 리시버를 키시면 될 것 같습니다. 콘라드 박사님도 리시버.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 3년초 이지향이라고 합니다. 오늘 박사님의 강의를 너무 잘 들었는데 IB의 너무 장점들을 이렇게 IB 교육의 장점들을 많이 말씀해 주셨는데 혹시 박사님께서 생각하는 IB의 뭐 약점이라던가 좀 보완할 점이라던가 이런 관점들도 좀 궁금하거든요. 그래서 이런 것들에 대해서 한번 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Good question. Critical thinking. Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot. Where do I start? IB diploma program. And I've complained about this to the IB before, and I think they kind of agree. There's just a bit too much. So you take internal assessment. Why did we design internal assessment? It was because uniquely external summative assessments, so exams, it's putting too much pressure on students. So let's dial that back a bit and let them do some coursework along the way. And coursework is meant to be authentic. It's meant to be, something that shows how the student is learning without this highly pressurized environment. But it's become a kind of mini exam in and of itself, because students understand that they need to get the best possible score in their internal assessment. So there's a huge amount of pressure. And there's coursework for every single subject. So you take maths. If you talk to most students doing the IB diploma, for maths standard level, whether it's maths analysis or interpretation, the internal assessment is too long. It's like 20 pages. It's huge. You take the science internal assessments, there's so much. I think we could have the same quality with a little bit less, so that the students can breathe, so that the teachers can breathe. I mean, I was teaching theory of knowledge last year, and I was telling Keith this, in DP1, which was grade 11, I loved it, because we were exploring all sorts of things, there's quite a lot of freedom. But DP2 was so heavily assessment-driven. And then, I was chasing after all of these reflections the students have to do, and planning and progress forms, and the date's not right, and all of this bureaucracy. And I just got in the way. So I think they need to streamline the IBDP, streamline it. Sometimes less is more. Then for the MYP, I think it can be a little bit difficult to get your head around if you're a parent and you've got, all of these different elements that are coming in that are quite difficult to understand. So 4 assessment criteria per subject, and each one, which is out of 8, gives you a grade boundary that you then need to convert into a 7-point scale. A lot of MYP coordinators, they're sending a lot of information to teachers because they kind of have to. Well, they don't have to, but you have to think about how you do it. But sometimes, it's very heavy and bureaucratic. It's become, I think again, it can be streamlined. Also, when the IB started in the 60s, it was a dream. It was very small scale. It was something really special, and it still is special, but it's growing. And the idea is to get millions and millions of people doing it. And I think I'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow in my keynote, but the more you massify education and try to make it sort of one size fits all, the more difficult it is to sustain some of the things that make it special. I'm trying to tell everybody, okay, these are approaches to teaching, these are approaches to learning, this is the learner profile, It's like, well, can they be different? Can they think for themselves? Do we all have to do the same thing? So a little bit of flexibility and maybe a little bit more sort of fluidity, possibly, for the MYP. But, it's changed over time. It's less prescriptive, and there's more and more sort of balance. The PYP, I love the PYP. I really struggle to see what we could improve in the PYP. It's true, it's not my forte. My background's more DP and MYP. maybe that's why. But you know, if you look at the program's developments over time, first it was the IB diploma back in the 1960s, and then the next one is the PYP, which has got a lot of interesting research behind it. It's been influenced by the Reggio Emiliana approach. There's a lot of inquiry-based learning, which I think is appropriate. And it's a framework, so you can make it more or less rigorous. You can insert a syllabus into it. There's a lot on attitudes. PYP is great. I don't really... What could we improve in the PYP? I don't know. What do you think we could improve in the PYP? Everything can be improved. Huh? Any other questions?
네. 감사합니다. PIP는 그냥 쭉 가시면 될 것 같습니다. 예, IB라는 여정을 시작하고 교육 공동체와 함께 성장하고 발전해온 실제 경험담을 생생하게 전해주신 콘라드 휴즈 박사님께 다시 한번 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 행정사항 몇 가지 안내드리겠습니다. 지금 갖고 계시는 수신기는 반드시 반납 부탁드리고요. 그 문자의 만족도 조사도 부탁드리겠습니다. 좀 이따 사진 촬영 있습니다. 자, 이상으로 국제 바칼로레아 글로벌 리더 특강 마치고 소통과 협력적 네트워크 구축 시간을 가지도록 하겠습니다. 안내 요원의 인도에 따라서 스카이 17로 이동하시면 되겠습니다. 자, 그럼 기념 촬영을 하도록 하겠습니다. 함께 하신 모든 분께 감사드립니다. 안전하게 귀가 부탁드리겠습니다. 감사합니다. 네, 그리고 앞에 좀 보일 텐데 내일 컨퍼런스 있는 거 아시죠? 네, 꼭 참석해서 오시기 바랍니다. 네, 10시 시작이니까 30분 전에 오시면 될 것 같습니다. 네, 그러면 박사님과 사진을 찍을 건데 찍으실 분 앞으로 나오셔서 같이 잠깐 찍도록